Hello, and welcome to Realign Journey, the unfiltered guide to self-discovery and reconnection. I'm Siera Sambrosky, your host, and together we'll deep dive the topics that have caused us to lose touch with ourselves and explore ways to reconnect to our true self. This week, I am joined by Dr. Olivia Tucker. Dr. Olivia is a nervous system centered chiropractor with a focused emphasis on female hormones. As the owner of her own practice, Lux Chiropractic in Taylor, South Carolina, she specializes in hormone lab testing and interpreting, and also practices over 10 different chiropractic techniques. Dr. Olivia has certifications in prenatal care as well as cranial evaluation and adjusting, and defines her mission as addressing the root cause of dis-ease in order to allow each patient to optimize their potential so they too can share their God-given gifts with the world. Hi, Dr. Olivia.
Hi, Sierra. So good to be here with you.
I am so excited to have you. We have become more recently acquainted with each other, but we have had some super awesome, good, juicy conversations. So I'm very much
Mhm.
looking forward to today.
Me too.
Awesome. So one of the things that we had discussed about having covered in this conversation is really that connection of understanding how our physical health plays into our mental well-being and
Mhm.
also reverse, right? Well, your mental well-being does affect your physical health. And I know personally, if you don't mind, to share a little bit of your personal story. I know you had an athletic injury that really kind of pushed you down this path. So, would you like to share with everyone a little bit of
Yeah,
that? Okay.
absolutely. So my history goes back. The main event that happened that really cascaded that affected this cascade of where I am today is in when I was in eighth grade. I played very competitive soccer and I had a really bad soccer injury. I fractured multiple vertebra, blew out a bunch of discs, and was just in a way that was just overwhelming with pain and hurt. And over a couple of years, I was in and out of physical therapy, in and out of doctors' offices. No one was really able to give me real answers as to what is going on, why is this pain so severe, why am I okay for a couple of months, can be on the practice field, and then all of a sudden am out for another 3 months.
Hmm.
And so I just saw this cyclical I saw the cyclical pattern happening of I was okay, I was not okay, I was okay, and why this reoccurring injury was happening. So years later, I ended up playing volleyball in college, and 3 days after I graduated from undergrad, I got in a really bad car wreck.
Mm.
And this set me back because I felt like I was finally at a good spot after graduating undergrad, finishing volleyball, feeling like, okay, I don't finally just have to be rehabbing in order to play. I can really take the time to take care of my body and do what I need to do in order to feel good.
Mm.
And so it was a devastating car accident. I was rear-ended, and at first I was okay. I called my parents. I said, I got in a car accident. I feel great. I don't even have any whiplash. A couple hours later, I was actually on my way to an interview. And a couple hours later, I started to have this massive headache.
Mm.
And over the course of about a month and a half, I was not able to walk much past the driveway without getting on my hands and knees in pain,
Mm.
not even able to function. It was difficult for me to stand up. It was difficult for me to sit. I was having that reoccurring back pain, but even more than that, exacerbation of my neck and of my head, and it exhibited concussive symptoms for over a month. And this was the first time I really understood how tightly connected our physical bodies are with our emotional, mental, spiritual being, because
Mhm.
it put me in such a dark place. I
Mhm.
had always been such a happy, joyful, glass half full kind of girl, that with that attitude. And this just put me in a really dark spot of it was hard to see hope and it was hard to see anything past past the end of the driveway. Like I don't know what life looks like. I can't even function to be able to think about having a job right now.
Mm-hmm.
And especially at this point of life of where you're really starting to gain that independence. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was that first moment of really deeply understanding my own being, how tightly knit our emotional, spiritual, physical bodies are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I have been very fortunate to never have to suffer with major medical issues or any kind of major pain issues. And yet it's not hard for me to understand how easily it could be, especially so young. I mean, at that
Mm-hmm.
point, what are you, 21 maybe? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yep.
you're young, 22. And to be so all consumed by this pain and sort of
Mm-hmm.
the grimness of am I ever going to be okay again, that like you can't even think about, visualize any kind of future for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It was just a dark time. And I grew up in a Christian home and have a strong faith. And even that, it was so difficult to have hope in anything when you can't see, an inch past what's in front of your
Mm-hmm.
face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about your Christian faith and your upbringing that way, because that was one of the things I thought was like, these are the times, because you've said just now in the beginning here already about the spiritual impact that going through something like this, having some kind of physical trauma or chronic pain or chronic issue, disease of any kind, how that really does impact our spiritual perspective. Because for some people, most people, we like to think that our spiritual relationship with God or creator, whatever it is for you, is strong enough that when we have those hard times, I mean, that's kind of like what you're taught is that
Mm-hmm.
when you go through those hard times, when you're in the middle of the darkness, whatever it is that's causing that, you lean on that relationship, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, I mean, how much of that piece of it was important for you? Like, did that play some kind of pivotal role in kind of being able to turn things around and help you in the physical recovery then?
Oh my goodness, Sierra. Yes, I would never wish any of these physical ailments on anybody, but I would
Mm-hmm.
never take it back. It has taught me so much and really encouraged me to dig deeper than I ever would have to really understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been to a couple chiropractors growing up in my life. All my family went to a chiropractor's. For whatever reason, I had a bad experience in eighth grade after that injury. And
Mm-hmm.
I looked at my mom and I said, I never want to go to a chiropractor again. I hate chiropractic.
And
And
here you are.
and here I am. It always
Any
comes full circle.
it does. Anyway.
So yeah, after this car accident, that's when I first started chiropractic care consistently for the first time in my life. And it took some time, but probably 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then really 3 months was the big turnaround of all of a sudden I started to see the fog roll out, the curtains lift, the light again. And it was just such a moment of having hope back and knowing in that moment again, realizing how when that physical pain goes away, how much life that brings, how much clarity that brings my mind, how much focus that brings my mind, creativity, all of that started to come back. And so at this point, I had thought about chiropractic school, but I was honestly still trying to figure out my body, that it was overwhelming to even think about caring for other people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was still very much on my own journey of trying to help myself. And so a couple years down the road, I had a couple different jobs, and there was two jobs that I had. And in that second job, I had that lower back injury again. And it wasn't any injury that exacerbated it. It was just the accumulation over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took a leave from work and I worked with my chiropractor for 2 solid months. And again, it was like the curtains lifted And so at that moment, I was like, I don't know what this is, but chiropractic has been the only thing that has allowed me to feel hope again, to heal. And
Mhm.
I knew, I've always known inside me, you know, in eighth grade, we were talking about spinal surgeries and, you know, going to neurologists and talking about all this different, very invasive tools that we could have, that we could try. But there was
Mhm.
just something inside me that knew that at this point in life, like my God created my body to heal. I
Mhm.
know that this is not right. And I know that there's a way out of it. And it's surgery. Surgery can help, sure. And is it great for certain circumstances? Absolutely. But for me, I knew that that was not the answer. And I knew that if I did get surgery, it wasn't going to be the fix to my problems.
Mhm.
And so in this moment
Can
of
I
taking
just
that
stop
leap,
you right there? One
yes,
second.
absolutely.
Tell me, um, how did you know that the surgery wasn't going to be right for you?
Wow, that's a really great question. Um,
And there might
I
not be an
think,
elaborate answer to that. I was just curious because you were young,
hmm
and yet even now,
hmm
as you retell the story, you're very certain. Obviously, it ended up working out for you.
yeah,
But just the way you just recounted the story and being only like in eighth grade, that's pretty young. And yet it sounds like you were very certain, even back then, that surgery was not for you. So what kind of gave you that confidence? What made you feel that?
that's a really great question. I don't know if I've ever thought about it like that.
Mhm.
I think it was probably the accumulation of number one, my upbringing. My mom was always very encouraging of what holistic modalities can we use
Mm.
to help our bodies. And then if we need to go to Western medicine, we have that as a tool.
Mhm.
And so I think her voice probably rang in my head and played a role in that.
Mhm.
But I think there's another part of my being that is just a part of my personality is I'm a pretty go with the flow person. I'm a make it work type of girl. But if you step over my values, those are things that I am very sure about. And I don't know if it's I think it's more of a intuition inside me more than an intellect, but it
Mhm.
probably is the combination of the two of again going back to my faith of
Mhm.
what how God created us, how God created us to live. I mean,
Mhm.
he created us to be in a garden, to be outside, to be movement, like to have that movement. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if I can necessarily articulate what exactly it was, but there was
Okay.
just something in my bones
Uh-huh.
that I was so sure that I knew that there was another answer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's okay. I mean, I think that's true for a lot of people, right? Like we sometimes we don't know why, but we know what we know, right? And
Mhm.
so you
Mhm.
can't always articulate that feeling, but I was just curious because that jumped out at me straight away. But so you knew the surgery to take you back to your story. You
Mhm.
knew that surgery was not an option for you.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I knew surgery wasn't an option for me. And so this go round when I had to take that leave from work and I was working with my chiropractor, I was asking him a bunch of questions. I'm the kind of person that I like to understand why something is happening. And so I keep asking those questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he was giving me answers that I had never heard before. And I've always been interested in health. I remember I got my family off of drinking pop in eighth grade
Uh-huh.
because I heard it wasn't good for you. And so always just that curiosity towards how can we create a healthier environment for our bodies. And so just being inquisitive and asking him questions and learning, he really encouraged me to take a look at chiropractic school. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to understand about the body what he understood.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that decision, I decided to go to chiropractic school. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. There are so many more stories in there, but that was the moment that I decided to really understand. I went to chiropractic school to understand more of my body so I could help myself and then in turn be able to help other people and give them tools and resources in order for them to better understand their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's so great too that you know, mentioning that like our bodies do know how to heal. I mean, I'm sure they
Mhm.
like I said, I have some familiarity with you. So I would imagine, knowing you a little bit, that that's a really important piece that you probably try and bring and educate your patients on. And
Mhm.
maybe anybody that would listen, hopefully lots of people listen to this and you can bring that to them. But it's so true. I mean, we're literally designed, like, we don't have to think about our heart beating. We don't have to think about, the breathing. We don't have to think about the fact that, if we cut our finger, the area will start to get hot on its own because that's the body killing off bacteria. And then it goes through this whole, like, it will heal itself. It will heal
Mhm.
itself. And that's even in the biggest ways, too. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting going back to this simple scenario of when you get a cut on your finger, just like you said, it gets red, it gets swollen, it starts to close up, it heals. You can put on, Sporin, you can put on colloidal silver, you can go the crunchy route, you can go the more medical route, you can put a band-aid. All of those things are great and have a time and a place, but those things are still not, that's still like the colloidal silver is still not what is healing you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I work with a lot of people who are very holistic minded, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But we can holistically still have a symptomatic view. And if you're putting colloidal silver instead of neosporin on that cut, that's great. But it's still your body that's healing you. It's not that colloidal silver that's healing you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a super important point that a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
we miss is that it comes from the inside out, not the outside in.
Yes. I actually just got chills when you said that, because I mean, we say that all the time. I'm in kind of the mental spiritual side of work, right? So, I mean, we say that all the time. All the
Hmm.
rhetoric is, your happiness is inside out, right? But
Hmm.
it really kind of just tripped me up there to hear you say that, because you're right. Like, the healing still takes place from the inside out, no matter what. And that's true for our
Absolutely.
physical body, not just our mental bodies.
Absolutely. And switching over to that note of physical and mental, it is amazing, Sierra. People come into my office with physical ailments,
Mm-hmm.
and I guarantee 99.9999% of those people, it starts with an emotional trauma. It starts with an attitude. It starts with an
Mm-hmm.
obstacle stuck in their mind or a mindset that they're going around in circles. And these physical ailments are cascading symptoms down the road of a mental ailment, a mental and emotional ailment. And I know that's your zone of genius.
I
And I just
freaking
think
love that.
it's amazing what happens, but it's so cool because you can address it in my line of work. You can address it from the mental or emotional standpoint with conversations, but as a chiropractor, we can also give them tools to um, in the other sense, be able to heal their bodies
Mm-hmm.
so that their minds will be able to heal. So it's this cool, almost safety pin cycle that is that
Mm-hmm.
mind body connection. You can start from either place and help the opposite, help the inverse.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Again, you're so genius. I love you. I love listening to you. You make me think of all these little things that I've not really, because you're right. Like, I'm super into the idea, like Carolyn Myss and Louise Hay, and
Hmm.
and these Dr. Joe Dispenza, these people that
Hmm.
that really understood and try and communicate and educate on the emotional, mental underlyings of what is happening to us in our bodies, and the idea that we do have the power to heal ourselves, and that healing ourselves starts in the mind. And it's interesting also because, even though we already talked about this, something about the way you just said it a minute ago made me think, oh yes, sometimes you need to experience some of that physical healing first
Hmm.
before you can even get to the mental part. Because, like, in your case, and I imagine you maybe see this and maybe have another client experience or something that you can share, but like we were talking about with you in particular, that pain becomes so overwhelming, became such a period of darkness, right? It was such a weight and such a cloud over the way that you could think about yourself and your life, that you had to start experiencing some kind of physical relief, some physical hope that it wasn't always going to be this way before you could start to regain, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's really important, again, from my chiropractic training, that's kind of the lens at which I view health, the
Mm-hmm.
body that, or the power that we kind of say the power that made the body heals the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so always looking at chiropractic is not healing you. It is disrupting the force in your body so that your body can heal you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think
I
is so
like that.
cool about chiropractic is that we're looking at breaking neurological cycles. And sometimes if you're stuck in that emotional rut, or for me, when I was stuck in that physical pain,
Mm-hmm.
I needed someone to help me break that neurological cycle in my
Mm-hmm.
body to disrupt that pain so my body could reorganize so that I could have the mental capacity to address what I needed to. And I think that's the beauty of it too, is there's so many different practitioners and everybody is at a different spot. And so making sure that we're meeting people where they're at, where yes, I would say most root causes are a mental block, but I don't think we can look past. We do live in a very physical world, and
Mm-hmm.
there are physical things that affect our body that is later going to affect the mind. And so I think it is important to really take a look at where the person is at and where can we break that neurological cycle. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
that there's been tons of studies about chiropractic, how it's great for addictive personalities, people in addiction, because
Really?
you're in that cycle and all of a sudden your neurology is now getting rewired and you now have the ability to change the cycles that your body is circling in.
Whoa, I have not heard of this. I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. And I love that you were saying about being disruptor in those neurological patterns. I mean, I like to think of myself as a bit of a disruptor also. So
Yeah, I love it. You
I
are.
would
You
say
very much are.
I enjoy the disrupting that happens,
Yes.
no matter what form it takes and who's doing it. But can you just explain a little bit more about the neurological patterns for people that are listening that maybe that's not making a lot of sense to them?
Yes, absolutely. So let's take me, for example. In my scenario, what I talked about, my low back pain that had been going on since eighth grade, reoccurring, it's in that reoccurring cycle of I am feeling I am feeling pain in that low back. But if you looked at my x-rays at different points of times, you wouldn't necessarily see anything going on. You would think, okay, maybe there could have been a stress fracture there in different parts. And so realizing that the way that our nervous system works is our neurons, our neurotransmitters are sending a signal to our brain. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have pain receptors in your low back. Your
Mm-hmm.
pain is created in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there can there be tissue inflammation, disruption, broken bones? Absolutely. But the pain is being created in your mind. And after all of that was fixed and that was addressed, my low back, you could look at my back and think, oh man, that's a pretty normal spinal x-ray or MRI or bone scan or whatever that looked like. And
Mm-hmm.
yet I was still having pain. And so it's the signals that are being sent from my low back to my mind, and at some point in that circuit, something has to change. Neurotransmitters have got to be sending different signals to the mind. And so, a lot of times, what happens is our body is in that same pattern. My low back was super locked up
Mm-hmm.
because it's in that same cycle. All of a sudden, once I was able to get more movement in my spinal joints, my muscles started relaxing, my tissues around started healing. It was getting a different signal that was being sent to my mind, releasing different neurotransmitters, no longer experiencing pain, but realizing that they are healthy tissues down there now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little bit, I guess sometimes it can be difficult to explain it at a high level looking down. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, if you think about it like a safety pin of one side being the body, so my low back, and the other side being the brain,
Mhm.
you've got to disrupt somewhere in that signal, somewhere in that pattern. Something has to change. And for
Mhm.
me, it was the physical chiropractic adjustment, the movement of the spinal joints that are a huge part of our neurology, sending signals back up to the brain. That
Mhm.
had to change. And again, for me, it was chiropractic that disrupted that neurological cycle on a physical level, that
Mhm.
changed the mental output of pain, of that sensation.
Okay. So let me just see if I can also kind of phrase it another way, just so that I'm making sure I'm understanding. So it's really almost like programming, right? Like
Mm,
at some point, there's an injury, there's this pain that sends a signal to the brain. And sometimes, a lot of the times, probably, it somehow changes like the programming of the operating system as if we were attaching it to like a computer, right? And so it like somehow rewrites the code just a little bit. And then now your body, whether the pain is real or not, is operating as if it still is because that code got changed. Is that another way? Is that a decent way to explain it?
that was a phenomenal way. That was
Okay.
way more clear. And I'm so glad that you said that the way that you did. Yes, because you can look at that and think the keys aren't broken. I'm just pushing the wrong letters. And so,
Right.
yes, that
Okay.
was a great, thank you for bringing clarity to that.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that I mean, because that's how I always understood it. Um, but that because that's the same neuro programming that we see from trauma, right? People
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
suffer from PTSD. It's not that they are experiencing trauma again in real time. It's that there is a wiring issue. Their body is communicating to their brain this signaling, I am in danger. I am in danger. I am in danger. And so we see that reoccurring again in a mental state. And I think maybe probably culturally, I feel like there's other parts of the world that are better about this than we are, but I think culturally here in the States, we still see the physical and the mental as such separation. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't think about the fact that, like I said, people may have some awareness around that's what's happening with PTSD. That's what happens in the mind. Your body's having this constant fight or flight response or whatever. There's actually other responses that you go through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the same thing happens because it really is a trauma to the body. And so it does
Mm-hmm.
make your brain react like even if it's a car accident, right? Even if it's something that, like you were saying, you would see your X-rays or and scans and all that other stuff might look perfectly normal in quotes,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the brain is still sort of prepared and braced up, and like you were saying, it's all clenched up, your muscles clenched up, like you're still in this very protective tough stance, like I'm going to be able to weather whatever happens and strikes me next.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what you said too, Sarah, that triggered something in me of our body reacts. So whether it's PTSD, whether it's endometriosis, whether it's Hashimoto's, whatever diagnosis, I want to make it very clear that your body doesn't make mistakes. Your
Mm,
body responds to the environment. And so if you have a medical diagnosis or not, whatever symptoms you have, you are not broken. You have to ask yourself, your body is working for you. Why is your body responding this way? And I think that's a really important point for people to be able to empower themselves that their body can heal from certain circumstances and to not be victimized by a diagnosis that a doctor or healthcare practitioner gave them.
oh my gosh, I love you so much. I literally got chills when you were saying that, and I was like, yes, it's the same thing that so many of us say, like, circumstance, like, you're not broken. It's whatever has happened to you. You have to move through that. You have to understand that. And like I said, I think there's this giant disconnect between, we kind of allow certain things to sort of be acceptable in an emotional, mental realm, and then we're not applying it. So I so love that you're saying and applying this to the physical stuff too, because there are so many people that suffer out there from these chronic diseases and chronic pains, and you hear about, the injuries and addiction. Like I said, I didn't hear about that stuff before, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely. And I think the further, or well, let's say it this way, the better connection our emotions, our spiritual, our mental aspect that we have with our body, the easier and the faster symptoms resolve. The further disconnect we have
Mm.
of our perceived reality in our mind and our physical reality, the further disconnect they are, a lot of times the more symptoms people experience. And so it is important to take care of both because we are one being. Our body is an expression of our mind.
Yes. 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 I love that
Yeah.
too. I love that too. I mean, again, that makes so much sense to me, that the further that disconnection, the less integrated we are as a whole being,
Mhm.
the more you're going to experience disconnect, right?
Mhm.
Dis-ease
Yes,
in these other areas, no matter how it shows up for you, for sure. Is there,
absolutely.
in your work with your patients, you do the chiropractic stuff, but is there
Mhm.
also sort of an overlaying, because of you being who you are and your belief system, that you do also are able to also kind of give people some pointers, some direction, some guidance on the mental, spiritual stuff they can be doing to work in tandem to help heal themselves
Mhm.
physically?
Absolutely. So
Mm,
I will be the first person to say I am not a trained counselor,
yeah,
nor do I pretend to be ever.
yeah.
Um, and so, but I do recognize that when I work with people, I'm working with the whole person, and I can't just address the physical aspect and expect everything to clear up if I truly believe it's um, an emotional trauma or whatever it is that's the root cause of the issue. So one thing I do, I definitely love referring with other health professionals. I love referring to counselors. I love referring to other body workers because what I see is when someone is doing multiple, the the synergy between them, patients get better so much faster
Mm-hmm,
when they are coming from different angles and also working on their stuff at home.
mm-hmm,
So outside of referrals, I do I have really great relationships with my patients. And so I'm not afraid. I really want to establish that trust. But what I do is I usually ask them questions. And a lot of times when we're talking out loud, I'm not talking at them, I'm not giving them advice if they're not asking. I ask them questions in a way that will change their perspective and allow them to see maybe what they haven't seen before.
mm-hmm.
And so, with that, I also encourage them to do things like mindfulness exercises at home, journaling. Sometimes I'll teach different breathing exercises. Another thing I do as a somatic visceral activity in the office is I'll work on different organ reflexes.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's go through one, for example.
Yeah, let's.
Um, okay, so if have you ever experienced, Sarah, have you ever experienced worry, stress, anxiousness, overthinking?
Oh yeah, I think a time or two.
I will raise my hand also. So every emotion that we have is stored in different organs. There are
Right.
different pathways that stresses. So specifically anxiousness, worry, overthinking, emotional stress, that resides in your stomach, our
Mm-hmm.
gastric area.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about it, if you've been stressed before, or you get really nervous before something, you get butterflies in your stomach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes these ideas sound way out there if you're not familiar with it, but
Mm-hmm.
then we can say, I bet everybody listening to this has experienced that before.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing I do in my office is if they are telling me, in that initial conversation that they've been really stressed or they're really worried about, their kid, XYZ, we'll go through some different somatic exercises. So if you actually take the web of your left thumb, so your
Okay.
stomach's on your left side, right underneath your ribs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to go to the left thumb web
Uh-huh.
and if you go deep within where that thumb meets that first finger,
Yeah.
relax your left hand and pinch pretty deeply with your right hand into your left thumb web.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you can feel that
Mm-hmm.
if you've been stressed or worried, it's pretty tender in there. I know there will be patients that will just about jump off the table and be like, whoa, I did not realize that was there.
Yeah. I was like,
And
oh, maybe I'm a little
yeah,
tenser than I thought since I just tried that myself.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so recognizing that, okay, well, when you're stressed or when you're worried, you can actually pinch that part of your left thumb web and kind of massage it until it becomes less tender, until it relaxes while you're doing a deep breathing exercise. And that
Mm,
can actually help stimulate faster to unwind that worry, that anxiousness in your mind. And so, again, going back to how can
yes.
we use our body as tools to help release some of those emotions in our mind?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. That's a fantastic tip and exercise. And maybe we can try and figure out too how we can share with people maybe some photos of kind of what you're talking about there. Um,
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
since they don't see us.
Yeah.
But we can between the two your social media and mine, we'll share them back and forth or whatever. So that way anybody that's interested in kind of if you aren't understanding the way that she communicated it, though I think you did a really great job, Dr. Olivia.
Thank you.
Um, in case you need a visual aid, we'll work on getting that together for you. But I mean, okay, so that leads into one of it brings up a second question, but one of my most favorite topics to talk about is the emotions and how they're stored in our
Mm.
different organs.
Hmm.
Would you like to share some knowledge that you have around maybe being able to identify like where grief is, where most anger is, that kind of stuff? Because I love
Absolutely. I'll share a little bit and then you continue on.
that. Okay.
So I love traditional Chinese medicine, and so
Mhm.
I dabble in that a little bit, but I love it because I see the body from a chiropractic perspective, and there are different organ reflexes from a chiropractic perspective, specifically SOT technique. But then if you overlay that with traditional Chinese medicine, there are so it's like seeing the body mapped out in two different ways, yet there are so many overlaps.
Okay.
And so kind of going from which organs store which emotions. So we talked about that stomach storing
Mhm.
stress, worry, anxiousness. If we move over to the liver, which is on the right side, right underneath your rib cage, your liver and gallbladder are associated with anger, irritation, frustration. If you think of a lot of people know this example of an alcoholic who gets very angry. That's
Mhm.
probably because his liver from the alcohol is a really fatty liver, is really clogged. There is not much flowing out of his liver. And so
Mhm.
that's creating the emotion of frustration or anger, irritation, or
Mhm.
vice versa. That
Mhm.
anger, frustration, irritation can actually create fatty liver.
Mhm. And bottling it up and not processing it properly, emotionally and mentally can also cause the physical addiction that is contributing to I mean, that's like a whole interconnected circle, right?
Yes, 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 yes,
Right?
yes, yes.
Right. For sure. For sure. Yeah. And certainly too, like, I know that there's such a patterning that we can often see like in women that have breast cancer. And oftentimes it is the over nurturing, over giving personalities, people that have such a sense of needing to earn other people's love and affection because they have their own worthiness issues. And it's uncanny. I know. Have you ever heard of Dr. Bernie Siegel?
No, I haven't.
He was an oncologist that really kind of started to study the emotional, like lifestyle patterns, like from an emotional, mental lifestyle, what was happening in people's homes and their childhoods and their psyches. And then,
Is this German New Medicine?
no, he was around. He was here. He's here in this. I don't believe he's with us anymore. I'm pretty sure he passed a long time ago now. But in the 70s and 80s. And he actually started at the cusp of the AIDS epidemic, also started to look at what were but he was an oncologist. And he started, but he just had this fascination about the emotional mental connection to what makes some people more susceptible than others, right? And now we kind of have this study about epigenetics, how we all have cancerous cells, we all have all these things, and they just get turned on and off in us because of different lifestyles or mental or emotional. But yet he really pulled in the idea about these things that were happening, in particular women that were experiencing either breast or uterine cancer, were the two big ones that he had really studied. And it was uncanny to see how they were over nurturing everyone else and completely selflessly lacking in any kind of self-care, self-consideration, self-prioritization in their lives. And it was like all of them. And he studied thousands of women.
That sounds, Sierra, that sounds so much like, have you heard of German New Medicine before?
No,
It sounds very similar. There was a doc, and he saw in his own life, he got prostate cancer right after his son died, realized that there had to be some connection, started to dig deeper. Long story short, he was finding plaques in the brain, different areas of where we store different emotions in the brain, correlating with different cancers, breast cancer, prostate cancer, that exact same thing. Of if you were to look at any cancer patient and MRI their brain, he could tell you what emotion was going on and what they were doing in their life that caused that cancer, that type of cancer.
Yeah. I mean, I just love it. I totally geek out over this stuff.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting. Same thing. I'll share with you. So there also, Dr. Bernie Siegel also has in one of his books, a whole section on it about something else that he did with these patients of his, and he would have them draw pictures, like very childlike pictures with crayons. And he would have them draw one picture of what the cancer in their body was like, and have them draw another picture of what the treatment was like. And it's so obvious that it's startling that you could clearly look at people's pictures and see that there was a benignness to the way they saw cancer in the body, right? Or that it was like a monster, like a child drawing a monster, like eating them, right? Like, okay, obviously that mental perspective, the way that they're portraying it into like with almost 100% certainty, he was able to predict who would recover and who would not. Also, by looking at the photos of how they perceived their treatment, like in the book, there's one where like I don't remember if it's a man or a woman, but draws the picture of the treatment of like their stick figure body laying on this bed and sees it as poison being dripped into their body.
Wow.
Well, how effective do you think their cancer treatment was to make them survive? If they are holding this mental image that is just poison being dripped into their body.
That is amazing. That just, man, we could talk forever, but that reminds me of a story. There's so many of these stories in Joe Dispenza's book, We Are the Placebo. I believe that's the title. And he talks about how this guy got diagnosed with cancer. He had 3 months to live. 3 months later, he died. The autopsy revealed they had misdiagnosed him, 0 cancer.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with his body.
Yep.
What our mind perceives is everything.
It's the only thing. And that's definitely a whole nother conversation. But it truly, truly is the only thing. It really is. Well,
Oh,
and I think too, how much, in your personal story, at what point was it that you started to see hope? You started to feel like shifting your own mindset that this
mm.
is not going to be a chronic thing forever. I can fully heal from this.
The start of that was when I was with that doc and I decided to go to chiropractic school, realizing that I just needed to gather the tools and understanding. But Sierra, when I went to chiropractic school, it was a whole nother cascade of health issues. And for 2 years, I had never been on birth control. I ended up losing my cycle for 2 years.
Mm.
Um, had anaphylactic reactions to things like sweet potatoes, sprouts, tomatoes.
Oh my.
I like lost 50 pounds out of nowhere and was like, it was so bad. My health was getting to a point. I tested my hormones. It was way lower than postmenopausal women. And so realizing that I could use herbs, I could use different tools mentally, emotionally, in order to get to a state of where life is still stressful, but to not perceive that stress,
Mm-hmm.
and to watch my body heal through this process. I trusted in that process because of what I knew about our neurology and our physiology. I trusted the process, and it took 2 years, but after getting out of it, I have the most normal cycle I've ever had in my life. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that my cycle was abnormal when I was 16.
Right.
And so realizing I healed myself from all these food allergies, from these anaphylactic reactions, from sleep issues, from stress. I mean, I was exercising and I couldn't get my heart rate above 40 beats per minute. Like I was in a
Oh
really
my
bad state.
gosh.
There was and I had a heart grafts and all this stuff. There was not very much life in me at this point.
Mm.
I was letting grad school just suck the life out of me, mostly because I cared so much. I cared
Mm-hmm.
so much about what I was learning that I felt like I needed to learn everything right now to be able to apply it. Patients are going to be, I'm going to be responsible for patient care. Like I need to know absolutely everything I can in order to give them my best,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that I really have to take care of myself or I'm not going to be able to take care of anybody.
Right.
And so that was really that switch moment after that 2 years of working really, really hard on my health, seeing just night and day difference, realizing how much we have in our control, and how I can help patients help themselves. And that's where really my passion for hormones came in too, because we can address hormones. I address hormones mostly through our nervous system and through neurology.
Mm-hmm.
Hormones are an extension and a symptom, a secondary effect of other systems in our body, like our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't always understand that. So to be able to help women with their hormones from a neurological perspective, hormones change a lot faster than you think, rather
Mm-hmm.
than as opposed to just working on increasing or decreasing certain hormones.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, because even to hear you say that, I didn't know. You to say that, hormones are secondary, a secondary system to our nervous system. Like, I didn't think about it like that at all. I didn't know that.
mhm, mhm.
Um, though it does jump into my brain then, like, oh no, does that mean, when they say like our hormones are out of whack and then we get crazy, is that because of our nervous system?
Yeah, it starts in the nervous system. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing is about women, we have this 30-day cycle when you
Mm-hmm.
are menstruating of this
Mm-hmm.
feedback of your period tells you how have you been doing the last 3 weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
even when you're postmenopausal, you can still you're on a 24-hour cycle now, but you can still use different cycle cues to
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself to check in. But the more normal of a cycle that you have, the easier menopause is, the easier your postmenopausal years are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is so important to be able to address that sooner rather than later. And you're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. It does start with the nervous system. That's telling what hormones to be released or not released.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, sister, I know all about that. Um, I started menopause and years ago, not knowing, not understanding that was what was starting to happen to me. But like I'd say last year, the year before, I I legitimately thought I was losing my mind. I could
Mm,
not understand. I mean, and I've had a ton of therapy. I'm not afraid of the therapy. I've done a lot of personal work, a lot of growth on all these different things. But I had found myself in such a space where like my mind was not me. Like
mm,
and because I've done all this personal work, because like I meditate and I have all this, I've cultivated such self-awareness for myself. I literally would like see, feel myself start to relax. It was even the thoughts in my head would
mm.
be in such this place, and I would literally be like, this is not me. What the heck is happening? And I thought, I gotta go back into therapy. I was like telling my therapist, I don't know, like I've never been on medication for anything, but I was like, I don't know, you might need to give me some kind of medication. And even she didn't realize that it was probably the shift in my hormones.
Mm.
And I'll
Again,
tell
going back to, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and I'll tell you, I found a good organic supply of maca and
Mm,
it has changed my life. It makes me feel normal again. Like be more like the
mm.
person that I was, like I was losing the person that I knew how to be. And then because I am who I am, I was like beating myself up over why can't I be better? Why don't I do better? Why am I not being positive? Why is this stuff bothering me? All these things.
Think that's a perfect example of, yes, so many things stem from our mental aspect, but those physical chemicals of the hormones in your body, like that still does have an effect. And what we put in our body, that maca is so good for your adrenals, which are super important for women in menopause, because that's now where the primary source of your hormones are coming from. That does matter. And what we put in our bodies and on our bodies, that does have a huge effect for our mental well-being and our physical well-being. So
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to it does matter what we put in our mind and in our body.
Yeah. It surely, surely does. I would love to have you back to have a deeper conversation about the hormone aspect, about understanding our cycles, because I do believe, particularly, I don't know. You're younger than I am, Olivia. You're in I'm sure you're in the next generation down from me. So I don't know. Do you feel like it was explained to you? It was definitely not explained to us. Like our moms barely told us that we were going to get a period. Like we didn't we didn't have any context for anything.
No, we were told in our health class that if you have sex, you're going to have a miswanted pregnancy. That
Yeah.
was about it. We
Yeah.
weren't taught anything about what our body, they showed this is a tampon, this is a pad, you'll bleed once a month. But we were not taught anything. Why do
Yeah.
we bleed? How do we take care of ourselves? What does that mean for the rest of our month?
Mm-hmm.
How do we, what kinds of foods do we eat? How much sleep do we need? Like that differs at different parts of the cycle. You are so right. We were never, and I still don't think they're taught. I still don't think kids are taught about their bodies and how to take care of our bodies as females.
Yeah. Okay. If you're up for it, I would love to have you back to do a whole nother episode on that
Absolutely.
stuff for sure.
Absolutely. We'll dive deep into hormones next time.
Yes. Love it. I love it. Thank you so, so much for being here. I just absolutely love and adore you. I love our conversations. How can people find you, connect to you, whether they have questions or they're looking for some help, or tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I've got a website. The easiest place is probably Instagram, lux.chiropractic, lux.chiropractic. Same with Facebook. And then my website is luxchiropractic123.com. So
Okay.
super easy. I love it when people reach out with questions, whether you want chiropractic care or not. I love to be a resource to just point you in a direction to give you tools in order for you to be able to help yourself.
I know you're so awesome. You're so awesome. I love you. I can't wait to
Oh,
have you back. Thank
you so
you.
much. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me on your show. I
Yeah.
love listening to your other podcasting guests. You stimulate such great conversation. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all the sojourners out there that are listening to each of these episodes. We hope you found a lot of value in this one today. If you did, please leave a review, like, and follow this podcast, as that always helps us to know that I'm picking the right guests and I'm doing a good job. Thanks, everyone, and listen in next week.